Travis Wayne Goodsell. I'm back from my run. I've got the John DeLynn video uploading on YouTube. And so during my run, I'm going to give this video, which will be the rest of the story of the sad tale of the LDS Mormon Armageddon. Because it didn't just end with the murder of Joseph Smith. In 1871, Albert Pike wrote a letter to Giuseppe Mazzini. Giuseppe Mazzini was the head of the Illuminati at the time. Johann Adam Weishaupt being the founder, who died in 1830. Their Illuminati plan, when they organized on the 1st of May 1776, was to destroy Catholicism and its hold on the governments of Europe specifically, and thus calling themselves Illuminati, referring to themselves as enlightened over the dark bondage of Catholicism and Christianity that had been born out of the darkness of Catholicism during the Protestant Revolution. And so they promoted science over the teachings of the Catholic Church, and wanted to enlighten the world and at the same time destroy Christianity. But to do so, they needed to rise from the ashes of the governments that they destroyed and establish a central bank. And so that was the threat to America, the brand new nation that overthrew King George. And thus the Illuminati infiltrated the Scottish Rites, having been exposed publicly as the Illuminati group. So they infiltrated the Scottish Rites, rose into ranking, and took over. That's their method, their modus operandi. And so Brigham Young was from the Scottish Rites. Heber C. Kimball, his bestest buddy, was a master mason of the Scottish Rites in their hometown after the 1826 anti-Mason movement, where Joseph Smith Sr. Secreted William Morgan out of the country to save his life, and then took over the responsibility of warning America with the book he titled The Book of Mormon. And so Brigham Young had successfully assassinated Joseph and Hyrum Smith and took hostages and his loyalists, the Danites, into the Salt Lake Valley to establish the Kingdom of Deseret. And in the Kingdom of Deseret, he sent a terrorist threat letter to the United States government, as well as telling the United States to back off and leave him alone. Let him be to establish his own kingdom. The United States President refused and sent the army that held back the building of the Salt Lake Temple for 40 years. and also came in and deposed King Young from his seat of power and established a governorship position and allowed Brigham Young a second opportunity as governor of Utah, or the Utah Territory, as it was created from the Mexico Territory. But Brigham Young continued to be a thorn in the American government, and the American government deposed him from his throne as governor and put in different governors, which Brigham Young and the Mormons continually chased out of Utah Territory, as America had to continually put in a new governor time and time again during Brigham Young's lifetime. This was a completely different tactic than Joseph Smith, who ran for president to save America from the threat of the Illuminati having infiltrated the Scottish Rites movement. He being of the York Rites, the highest ranking being the Knights Templar. In the Scottish Rites, the highest ranking has the seal of the two eagles. So, as the Illuminati continued to thrive with Giuseppe Mazzani, Albert Pike wrote him this letter in 1871. And he talks about how to conquer the whole America, not just a single nation this time, as they've been doing since the foundation. And he explains how the First World War must take place. And he explains the Second World War, how that must take place. And then he gets to the Third World War. And this is where I'm going to begin reading. The Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agenter of the Illuminati between the political Zionists and the leaders of Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam and political Zionism mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economic exhaustion. So, if you're not familiar with the book of Revelation, you will see that Albert Pike is wanting to use John's revelation to fulfill the Illuminati plot to destroy the world. He is using the Christian interpretation of Revelation. So he's pitting Zionists and Islam against each other. And to do that, the rest of the world must be put into civil wars among themselves as to what to do about the Middle East conflict. And so then he goes on. We shall unleash the nihilists, out of nothing, the nothingness, the annihilists, and the atheists. And we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism origin of savagery and of the most bloody turmoil. A civil war between those who want to destroy and those who are anti-God, Christian God specifically. And so what you're going to see in this is political parties, a dichotomy warfare within nations between populists and globalists, Democrats and Republicans, conservatives and liberals, communists and fascists, socialists and Nazis, as we already see the formation of with the Second World War that was planned. Then everywhere, the citizens obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries will exterminate those destroyers of civilization. So that's good news. We'll conquer Trump. And the multitude disillusioned with Christianity. This is their plot, to destroy Christianity, to disillusion Christians about their own religion. How do they do that? Is it because of atheism that'll take over? A secularism that takes over? No. Like I said, what is in the book of Revelation referring to the war between Islam and the Jews of Jerusalem? There's supposed to be an almost complete takeover of Jerusalem and the destruction of Jews until an earthquake occurs. This earthquake will split the Mount of Olives, creating a valley of which the Jews will then flee through. On the other side of the valley is the Christian Jesus, and he will save the Jews and convert them to Christianity. So if Albert Pike is suggesting to fulfill the book of Revelation, and in the process disillusion Christians, just see what he's doing. He is purposely setting up the fulfillment of biblical prophecy to prove to Christians that they have it wrong. There is no second coming of Jesus Christ. The Jews already know this because Jesus failed the checklist for the last days Messiah, way back in the days of the New Testament. And that's why the Jews don't recognize Jesus, except for the Jews for Jesus, which has emerged. But the Jews themselves still say, no, we'll allow Jesus to be the prophet of Christians, but we're not going to acknowledge him as a Messiah because he was murdered. Joseph Smith, likewise, was murdered because Joseph Smith was setting himself up to be the last days Messiah. And the Scottish Rites infiltration of Joseph's organization understood this and proved to Mormons that their God was false by murdering Joseph Smith and sending the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints into a succession crisis, which allowed Brigham Young to rise from the ashes and take his Danites and those who he kidnapped, extorted, to the Salt Lake Valley. This is the plan, this is the plot, and it's already been implemented on a smaller scale. 1871 was still 5 years away from when Brigham Young died. Let's see. So to continue on, the multitude disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will from that moment be without compass or direction. No Jesus to save them. They have to do it themselves to overthrow the corrupt governments. Revolutionary War. And people will realize it wasn't Jesus who saved us. We saved us. The resistance saved us as we overthrew our own government. And so Christianity no longer has a Christ to believe in because he failed to fulfill his own prophecy in the Bible. This is the plot. You will also know that this enemy also knows of the Jewish concept of the last days Messiah. And they also want to ruin the religion of Jews as well. Continually destroy them in the war against Islam, finally putting an end to the Jews as their Messiah fails to appear to save them. They know John's signs for the date in the future, 2017. Anxious for an ideal. Christians are now looking for a new leader, a new religious movement, something else, because Christianity has failed them. But without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light, illumination, through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out in the public view. Brigham Young of the Scottish Rites designed his temples with the inverted pentagram. Originally, it referred to the ox, as the Luciferians, the Church of Lucifer, turned it into a goat. But the horns and then the goatee represented the particular animal. But I've shown you with the star charts in the ancient astronomy that they're using Taurus for this symbolism, as the horns are representative of the sign that occurred in 4 AD up north of St. Petersburg. So that from the Middle East, the total solar eclipse was a partial eclipse, like it was in Utah in 2017. Oh, the video's ready to process, so I'll do that and get back to this. Exit out. Lots of people were busy last night. Not too many people came to my site. Alright. So Brigham Young designed the Nauvoo Temple to have the inverted pentagrams. It was not Joseph Smith's design. The Nauvoo Temple was then dedicated on the 1st of May, 1846, 2 years after Joseph died. There were Mormons who were upset that Brigham Young waited an extra month for the dedication because they wanted it to be on the 6th of April. Alpheus Cutler is one example. Alpheus Cutler was a member of the Standing High Council in Zion. And left Brigham Young's leadership with that change, and talked about how Joseph Smith had told Alpheus about signs to look for the restoration of the church. And believed it did occur, but he was wrong. It was the wrong year. And so, if you'll notice, the Seagull Gate on State Street at Temple Square, inverted pentagram also. As the Salt Lake Temple, inverted pentagram. The Logan Temple, inverted pentagram. This was Brigham Young with his Scottish Rites Freemasons of the Illuminati that had taken over. And so the Seagull Gate, if you look through it, you will see the hill, Capitol Hill, going up, the Capitol building, in between the arches. Specifically designed that way to show that Brigham Young had conquered Joseph's church and conquered the government, creating his own government controlled by the Illuminati. And so, okay, we'll get to it. This is already 22 minutes. This manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement, which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism. See, they're not pushing for atheism to take over the world. They're putting Lucifer as God, but conquered and exterminated at the same time. And so science, under the control of Lucifer. Joseph Smith explained in great detail, not just in the Book of Mormon, but in Moses chapter 4, verses 1 through 4, what Lucifer's doctrine is. Taking away agency. Controlling the masses. Not allowing them to do anything without permission. Giving a whole list of laws or commandments to follow, which causes confusion as to what to follow, and therefore living in fear and paranoia of violating the law and the punishment that is given for those who violate the law. Whereas those who are loyalists and in positions of power have an alternative law for them. The law of loyalty. So in 1900, an author who wrote children's books, Ingersoll Lockwood, wrote 2 books. The late 1800s, he wrote them. One was called 1900, The Last President. The other was titled Baron Trump, Amazing Journey, something like that. I'm doing this off my head. I don't have notes. This was all in my head as I was running. And those books for children were used by the Illuminati. Aha! There we go. This is how World War III will start. We will get a final president for America, because America will be given the power, as they were struggling still at this time. Around 1871, the United States created an act, not a law, it's a presidential act, turning the District of Columbia into a corporation. You'll also know that the street maps of DC are designed in an inverted pentagram, as the base of the inverted pentagram points at the White House for the earthly leader. The spiritual leader is the Illuminati, the Scottish Rites Lodge temple, between the two horns of the inverted pentagram of the streets. They are the light, the God of the Scottish Rites, the Illuminati, controlling the government with the presidency. And so it was necessary to design the government in such a way that the president gradually built up powers unto himself, until this last president finally took full control of the government. And they were going to refer to him as Trump. Baron being a title of nobility. And so World War I occurred, World War II occurred, and during World War II, America got to change their fortune. They had just gone through the Great Depression. The church during the Great Depression created Welfare Square to give charity to Mormons who had suffered because of the Great Depression. And so during World War II, America got their hands on the blueprints or the designs for a nuclear bomb. And they saw this as their opportunity to emerge out of debt and become a global leader. And so they worked on the designing of the bomb to the point where they had been ready to test it. And so in order to test it, the president arranged a deal with Japan to bomb Pearl Harbor. The Japanese government had planned on going through with this as they designed American currency after the takeover. A Japanese-American mix of currency. And so Pearl Harbor occurred, and the American president then put into action to deploy the test of the nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The American government was slow to respond to the war in Europe because they were on the side of Nazism. Because they knew that is what was necessary to have the war between communism and fascism, and that fascism would eventually lose. But Hitler had developed the bomb, and so the tide needed to turn to get America to help defeat Nazis. But knowing that Nazis were all part of this master plan. And so they justified it with the war against Japan, and then said, okay, we will now go in to assist in defeating Hitler, to fulfill Albert Pike and his plan. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints also knew of this plan and supported Hitler during all this, and were silent about Hitler's actions, not talking anything about their disgust or disapproval of Hitler and his plans. And so the Second World War defeated Nazism as communism spread throughout all the world. Then the 50s came around as Senator McCarthy, an American Nazi of the Republican Party, decided to seek revenge on the communists in America, and thus created the blacklisting to arrest all communists. And so Disney, Hollywood, and others were all arrested and put on this blacklist. Even the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints came under attack because of the welfare square that they created during the Great Depression. But now the church is outwardly speaking out against communism. Not against Nazism, communism. We are not communists. We denounce communism in all its forms of pure satanic evil. See the dichotomous division, the controversy? And so the church was spared as they gave loyalty to the Nazis of America. Auschwitz was funded by Prescott Bush through his bank. And so in the 60s, his son was a part of the CIA. It was not fully known until documents have emerged that placed him in Dallas as a CIA operative. Yes, the assassination of Kennedy. And thus gave rise to Nixon. that CIA operative eventually became president and gave his 1,000 points of Illuminati light speech and other Illuminati speeches. As a CIA operative, he also formed the coup in Chile on 9/11. Also on 9/11, Brigham Young caused the Mountain Meadows Massacre. In 1912 or I think it's 1912, not 1917, the Russian nation at that time took the Illuminati seal as their seal, the two-headed eagle. America, if you're unfamiliar with America's seal, is the Illuminati seal. And you can see it on the dollar bill as well. The pyramid, as well as the one eagle. And so Russia took the symbol of the Scottish Rites Illuminati. And so it was necessary, in order to fulfill Revelation, that they needed a world leader to be the dragon. They needed a world leader to be the beast. And they needed a religious leader to be the false prophet. But it had to be in America, because that's where the signs were to occur. And so then we have 9/11 by the son of the CIA, Poppy Bush, whose election was settled in the state of Florida, where Jeb Bush was governor, as America was for the first time split almost 50-50 in their civil war that was building. After the Civil War in the United States, which was part of the Illuminati plot to try to continue to destroy America, the South, having failed to have their president as the president of future succession, as he's been banished from the list of presidents of America, the Confederates became the KKK, and they infiltrated the government in the Senate seats, and thus that's why America wasn't interested in the war in Europe. They were supporting Nazis. Prescott Bush supported Nazis as well as funding Auschwitz. And so then you have the CIA operative, Poppy Bush, who assassinates or orchestrates the assassination of President Kennedy, and then of Bobby Kennedy, and then of Martin Luther King. And then we get to the other Bush president, who then causes 9/11, as a BYU professor is silenced by the church for explaining physics principles, as he was a physics teacher at BYU, trying to let everybody know that the government was covering up 9/11, that the physics from the 9/11 report were a violation of the laws of physics. And he had determined that there had to have been a demolition explosion in order to bring down the building as quick as it fell. That was the only explanation that fit the evidence. The security for the towers was by the other Bush brother. It's now been removed from the records on the internet and everywhere. So now his business quit being security a year beforehand. But there's no record of who took over as security after that. I'm trying to make sure that I fill in all the gaps of this outline. So then you have Mr. Trump, and he gives birth to a family. One daughter becomes a judge, a federal judge. Another son becomes a drunk. Or was that the Bush family son? No, I don't think it was the Bush family son. It was the Trump family. The other one becomes a drunk. And then there's Donald John Trump. Specifically named because Donald means world leader. John refers to the book of Revelation, the author of Revelation. And Trump referring to Ingersoll Lockwood's children's books with the Trump family name. Trump grows up spoiled brat, specifically for the fulfillment of Revelation, because the beast is a horrible human character, blaspheming with his image, which becomes a TV personality, just full of lies, full of blasphemies, full of criminal behavior, full of lustful behavior. And he was purposely groomed to be this character, a spoiled rich brat, illiterate and pure evil and immoral, specifically to be the last president to destroy America. He gets involved with the Miss Teen USA and takes his pageant to Moscow, where he is desperate to meet Putin, his hero, his idol. And Russia uses this to groom Trump to become president, as they are the only ones who provide Trump with funding after his daddy dies, and nobody in America or anywhere in a legitimate business of bank would invest in Trump to give him a loan. Trump was used to his daddy bailing him out and continually giving him loans, which were not really loans because Dad never expected anything back. And so Russia then funds Trump's activities and proclivities. And also, in the 2012 election, where Putin again takes over as leader of Russia, the Apostle Russell M. Nelson is assigned to the Russian area and goes to Russia in 2013, where Sister Nelson speaks with the youth in Russia and finds out that the youth in the audience were from all the various 12 tribes of Israel. And Nelson was involved in business meetings. And Russia then saw the potential for Nelson to take over the church one day in the near future. But it required the death of a number of other apostles and President Monson as well. As 2017 comes around, Monson is getting sicker and weaker. He's got diabetes that's causing him problems, and he's also got dementia, which is causing memory problems as well. And so the church is protecting Monson from the public, from Mormonism, so that they don't see that their president is ineffective. And the Packer had been dead since the Tetrad in 2014-2015, after the third one on conference mornings of Saturday 2015, after in between that time period. And so Nelson was now the successor to the throne of the LDS Church. And yet the church was publicly putting out new actions with Monson's signature on them. This was all done under the leadership of Nelson, who was usurping Monson's power prematurely. The Boy Scouts were terminated during this time period. The church was no longer going to be involved with the Boy Scouts. The scandal of sexual deviance among the church was getting too great, as it was going to result in numerous lawsuits that the church could not handle. 8,000, as we found out this past week. But Monson still was hanging in there. He was not dying. Trump took over in 2017 as the Russians put Trump into the presidency as their puppet president, their Manchurian candidate. And Orrin Hatch, the Senate pro tempore, whatever the title is called, the third in line for succession of the presidency, needed to appease Trump, but also appease his church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as he's the Mormon Utah representative. He designs the tax bill to support the church, as they needed to funnel money through LLC companies from Russian oligarchs. so that they can launder money in the deal to have a Russian temple. But they needed to do it quick. And so the tax bill was rushed in that December of 2017. And Senator Brown of the Democrat Party got into a heated argument with Orrin Hatch when they were discussing the bill. Senator Brown said, "This does nothing for the poor. This only benefits the rich." And Senator Hatch gave a little angry crying session about how he was born poor and this was poor for the poor, and how dare he say otherwise. And it turns out it was for the rich, it was for the church, so that they can begin the formation of their LLC corporations, from which 32 billion were funneled through from Russia, with the future promise that they might be able to obtain a Russian temple. The church already had hundreds of billions from other investments. They were already filthy rich. And but Monson still, as the new year began, as the tax bill got approved, they needed to get these LLC corporations started so that they can funnel the money through. But it required President Monson's signature. So, isn't it just a coincidence that Monson dies on the night of John's Revelation sign of the stars from the tail of the dragon falling from heaven, the quadrantids, at 10:02 p.m. on the 2nd of January 2018, during the supermoon, which would become a blood super wolf full total lunar eclipse, blood blue moon, on the 31st of January. The moon shall be turned to blood. Wolves in sheep's clothing. By their fruits ye shall know them. And so Monson dies, and Nelson takes over the throne of the church. And in that first April conference, he announces the temple in Russia. It wasn't until the next month in May, when Fox 13 News' Max Roth investigates and finds out that the church had started these LLC companies at the beginning of the year, and reports on it. Nelson also takes away the high priesthood. No elder can become a high priest anymore, as the high priests get pushed into the elders' quorum. He would also take away the home teaching program, making it only a ministering program for those who need it. So the members are no longer being watched over and cared for. The church also stops reporting their statistics publicly. Then Trump declares Jerusalem the capital of Israel, and moves the embassy to Jerusalem, setting off a war against the Palestinians. As Trump calls himself the chosen one from a Chinese Christian group, cult group, believing that Trump is the fulfillment of the last days Messiah rather than the beast. And as we've been paying attention to in the past several months, Nelson's children are being sued for satanic rituals and pedophilia in the 1980s in their home in Bountiful. And that lawsuit was stalled, as it's now it's in the Supreme Court of Utah now to decide if Nelson should be deposed in that case. And so the very next Monday, after that Friday stall, Gaddy versus COP was filed by Kay Birmingham. As Judge First allows it to proceed. Judge First then is terminated because of that action, not protecting the church. Then, on September 30th, some obscure guy, who knows who he is, Travis Wayne Goodsell, files his lawsuit against the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and is assigned Judge First to the case. And this time, she tries to cancel it by holding a hearing on the 1st of November. But Travis was able to show that the church has been paying the person who disappeared him back in 2008. And so the judge allowed Travis to refile. Travis refiled. She's now refusing to reply in order to prevent the church from getting destroyed by Travis's lawsuits, request for relief, because Travis has a case. And if it were allowed to proceed, the church would cease to exist, because Travis would win the civil case, and the federal government would be forced to file criminal charges. And the criminal charges include treason against America, war crimes, RICO violations, that's criminal organization, hate crimes, bigamy. Travis has a solid case against the church. And he has in all rights won because of the concession of the judge's refusal to respond. And the church's knowledge of it by attempting to cover up the connection to the case in 2008. And other actions taken by the church to silence him on social media. And so I think that's where we're ended up currently. The Boy Scouts have declared bankruptcy to screw over the boys who were raped. The church is already gone from the Boy Scouts, so they're washing their hands of the whole thing. Hey, we had nothing to do with it. Don't have no clue. And the handbook is released the day before the judge was supposed to give her order for the church to give over the whole church to Travis. And so that got released the day after the Boy Scouts were declaring bankruptcy. And then Business Insider reported that the church has investments in the whole social medias and Deutsche Bank, where Trump got his money from Russia. And so, yeah, that's where we are today. How will this turn out? Will Mormons give up on their church? And let's see, how does he say it? Disillusioned with Mormonism, whose deistic spirits will from that moment be without compass or direction, anxious for an ideal, but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer in Moses chapter 4, verse 1 through 4, and throughout the Book of Mormon. For the layman's views, the Great and Abominable Church's views, the rich Zoramites' views, King Noah's views, the Gadianton robbers' views, the Antichrist views, etc. So this is what I'm talking about, guys. The church is in on the plot to destroy America by destroying the church as well. That's why when the handbook came out, I said, oh my God, the church doesn't care anymore. This is why I was warning you guys. The church is purposely destroying the church, so that Mormonism will become Luciferianism, because that's what it is now. Under Brigham Young, it became Lucifer's church, the Great and Abominable Church, the Church of the Devil, with the inverted pentagrams and the taking away of agency, putting the saints in bondage, forcing them to pay tithing in order to receive the temple rituals. This is what I've been warning of. And it all came to pass, because that was their plan, to purposely get the hopes up of Mormons and Christians and then crush them, so that Christianity and Mormons don't know where to turn to. Our leaders are gone. They fled the country with the trillions of dollars they've been saving up. Who do we look to now to lead and guide us? The handbook. The pure doctrine of Lucifer is to guide the Mormon Church. Brought finally out in the public view. Now, I understand this is a long video. I'm over an hour now. I doubt anybody's listening to this far in. But it's happening. I don't know when it's going to finally happen, because Trump is purposely, then everywhere the citizens obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries will exterminate those destroyers of civilization. See, that hasn't happened yet. Trump is having a difficult time getting Americans to actually fight for freedom. We've given up after the civil rights movement. We've been exhausted. Physically, morally, spiritually, and economically exhausted. America is apathetic because we're exhausted. We can't fight anymore. And so Trump is just running rampant. And so the destruction may be an extermination without an actual fighting. Because America doesn't seem to have it in them. I mean, there's talk of the Bernie bros and the Trump loyalists, but it's just not going as fast as they're wanting it to. But they have no need for rushing anymore, do they? They have succeeded. But the church has panicked as they finally brought out into public view the handbook of pure doctrine of Lucifer. The fulfillment of the Scottish Rites Illuminati, of whom Russia has the seal of the Scottish Rites Illuminati. The church was taken over by a Scottish Rites Mason, and Trump, who's the puppet, used specifically because they knew he would destroy America, as he did with his businesses, constantly being needed to be bailed out time and time again. The economy is at an all-time high for deficit. We're at an all-time high for the debt. The stock market is at an all-time high because of the debt and the deficit being given to the rich corporations who invest in the stock market in themselves. That's why the stock market rises, but the deficit and the debt also rises. The poor suffer under this economic system. And humans are being exterminated as the earth is being polluted and destroyed by fires, eliminating the vegetation. Russia irradiated Russia with the nuclear experiments. It's an all-out assault on humanity. The destroyers are destroying civilization. It's the end of the world as we know it. We should not feel fine.